Welcome to our webinar, Vessel Performance Digital Tools, a composable and model-driven approach, session 1 of 3, Introduction. Our guest speakers today are Dimitri Liras, founder and managing director of Ulysses Systems, Peter Mantell, CCO of there, and David Levy, chief marketing officer of Orbit.me. If you have any questions about the topics today, please type them in the Q&A section and we'll get them answered for you at the end of the presentation. Here is our host, Carl Jeffrey from Digital Ship, to explain more.
So managing vessel performance with digital technology is getting very complicated. And today we're going to explore what might be a better approach to doing it based on putting together software components which integrate well. So that's different to the approach many people are taking, having one single software tool from one company or having multiple components and trying to put them together by extracting the data from them. So vessel performance management is hard because the scope is huge. So it goes from gathering data from vessels, ideally continuously, communicating it with cloud software, building and continuously updating the hydrodynamic model of the ship, gathering weather data, calculating the best route and speed, working with the crew, working out the best time to do hull cleaning, managing compliance with CII, minimizing ETS costs, meeting future requirements for carbon integrity of fuels, requirements and reporting for charterers, banks and insurers, and making investment decisions. And it's going to get more and more complicated as the decarbonisation gets tighter. So you can look for a software system which does all of the stuff I just described, but I don't know one, or you can use a range of different solutions, but then you've got the problem of how to integrate them. Some people see the way forward as extracting data from the systems and putting it together in a sort of data lake and then organising it, but there's no data standards and the data means different things for different systems. I don't know anyone who's managed to make that approach work. So we're here today to talk about another way of doing it, which is putting together a range of software components and integrating them together at a software to software level. So that probably means software components where we can understand what the software takes in, what it does and what it gives out. We don't want any black boxes. We need the understanding because we need to make the software easy to integrate with. So we call the approach composable and model driven. So integration doesn't sound like the most exciting topic in the world, but hopefully the industry is moving beyond the point where it buys technology that gets people excited, because that doesn't work. We end up with lots of different software on our ships and offices which doesn't integrate. Integration is a bit like plumbing. It doesn't sound like the most exciting profession, but when you really need a plumber, it's quite exciting to see one. So our first speaker today, Dimitri Liras, has a shipowning background, and he's also founder of maritime software company Ulysses Systems. They specialize in supporting shipboard and office staff to manage their tasks. He's based in Athens. Then we're going to hear from David Levy, Chief Marketing Officer of Orbit.me. That's a software as a service company based in New York City, helping shipping companies improve the efficiency, safety, and sustainability of the operations. Then we hear from Peter Mantell, Chief Commercial Officer of there. They're a specialist in voyage optimization based in London, and they build software which integrates with a number of other providers, including weather data and ship hydrodynamic modeling. We're going to have 3 presentations of about 10 minutes from Dimitri, David, and Peter about how they see digital integration and distributed development being used in managing vessel performance. We should have plenty of time for questions, so please put your questions in the Q&A box at any time. And we're going to start with a talk from Dimitri Liras. So Dimitri, please start.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me, Carl, and Digital Ship, and thanks for the excellent opportunity to discuss things here. Integration, you said, is like plumbing. Yeah, it's down to earth like plumbing. There's nothing, as you say, exciting to get the first page of any magazine. But it's there. Like plumbing, it's always there. And when it doesn't work, it's a big problem. So what I'll do is, I instead of sort of discussing integration by itself, I'm going to discuss a little bit about how the software industry is moving. We have here 2 excellent examples of, and many more to come, examples of cutting edge technology for the improvement of performance on ships. This kind of work is not going to be coming from the likes of a Silicon Valley company like Microsoft or Google or Oracle, anybody like that. Reason being that these people have better fish to fry, and our verticals too small for them. And even if they had a similar abstracted set of use cases for general transportation or something, it would be too awkward to use in our industry. Software meshes with people. It's not supposed to get in their way, and they're not supposed to have to sit and work it out. So the chances are that somebody from another industry is going to make something excellent in our industry is not high. And if it does happen, it's going to be very slow to develop. So what we're getting is cutting edge technology coming in to solve a huge problem that we're seeing in front of us that Carl explained. Now, if we take it for granted that companies are going to come up with, going to bring technology from somewhere else and apply it to our industry in a very intense way, intense meaning they're going to develop a lot of software, present it to the industry, and try and sell it as fast as they can because there's going to be competition. That scene is not going to is inevitable. We're not going to have some large software company, either incumbent in the shipping domain or from outside, come and pull all this together. The reason is that the concentration needed to make differentiated software is such that it doesn't allow you to make all the other stuff. If we came up with excellent hydrogen engines for cars, we probably wouldn't concentrate on tires as well. We'd buy tires off the shelf. So if somebody has to put together the car, and as time goes by and as software improves in its architecture, because it's not there yet, we're going to see companies like Dell or other software developing, like Dell develops hardware, and like Daimler develops cars, and how production lines, industry production lines are made, how shipyards make ships. They don't make all the components. They make hardly any of them. They make the steel, and they make the general design, and they organize and become the consolidator of the ship. Now, this is going to happen with software. I can't see it happening any other way. The alternative is that the shipyard, let's say, as an example, builds the engines. I mean, they design the engines and build the engines, not just have a license or outfit and a licensee outfit. It's very unlikely that it would come up with a very good engine design. It's more likely that people have been making engines for a long time and designing them, going to do a better job. Then the generators, then the cranes, then the hydraulics, then the propellers, the shafting, everything. So as we know, shipyards are consolidators, and it's most likely that software companies are going to divide themselves into specialists and consolidators. And that being the case, the consolidators have to improve their game as far as integration is concerned. Right now, the only prior, let's say, paradigm we have is the systems integrators of 20 years ago that still exist today, whose job it is actually not to integrate industry components like a shipyard does, but to integrate something for the client there and then. So they look at the client systems and they pull them together. Then they go to another company, and the pulling together is completely different. They might use a few components, but the truth is it's a different integration exercise from client to client. Now, this isn't efficient. There's another part that needs to be thought of very carefully with software, is that software, like hardware, but doesn't need to be this way, actually starts from scratch every time. So if you design software, you're starting from zero, or there's not much you can transfer from previous software. Not because the concepts are different; they're not at all different. It's that the way that software is built it has an idiosyncrasy that it doesn't know. It doesn't. You can't compare it to something else and say, okay, I've got something that does this. I can compare it to that I mean, programmatically compare. I'm not saying somebody can look at it and say, oh, it might be the same, might not be. But programmatically compare the software and say that it's missing this and it needs that. This doesn't exist at the moment. And if you are going to be a consolidator, you've got to compare what you're getting. Like a shipyard can compare the specifications of what they're getting. In software, it's not so simple because the specifications aren't as clear, and software goes into much more detail than machinery does. So the way forward is most likely that that integration is going to take a big part. It's going to get much more sophisticated. It's not just going to be a few APIs and a description of outgoings and ingoings, input and output, and then every man for himself. Integration is probably going in the direction that it's something that the owner of the software, the actual shipping company in our case, owns the integration facilities. They buy them, and someone helps them integrate their systems. And that entity has a much more sophisticated game than just APIs. APIs are not computer readable. The software can't read them. It's a description for people to read. So it's very difficult to tell whether you're getting what you think you're getting is what you're getting. For example, you can take part numbers. Let's take a job description. Job description can have 5 or 10 attributes, or it can have 50 attributes. How are you going to consolidate the 50 into the 10? This is not something that the API is going to tell you very easily, because it's about what actually those attributes do in the business. And for example, you could have an attribute that tells you that there's something dangerous about that part of the job and it can't coincide with another part of the job. Now, if you that particular attribute is connected with safety, it's connected with construction of the engine room, could be connected to many things. So the ability to join things up isn't going to work if we don't understand exactly how the data came about and where it's going. In other words, somebody came up with an attribute to describe a job and a safety aspect of a job, and that we have to understand how that safety aspect is conceived and how it ends up. What does the software do with that? Otherwise, we can't ignore it, and we don't know how to join up something else. Also, that's not going to work if we have to read it in a text file. What we need to see how that thing runs. You need to do a dry run on the software and see how it propagates. What does it do to the system? What other systems read from it? So generally speaking, we think at Ulysses that the industry is going to change a lot, and that we're going to get specialist software companies, we're going to get smaller software companies building something very well, and all that will need to be joined up. And the joining up part is something that needs to be done very well. We have been thinking and working on it for 13 years, and we're not satisfied yet, but the joining up part is very, very central in what we believe we should be doing.
Oh, well, thank you very much. That was 10 minutes, so I guess we'll leave it there. So we'll go to New York now for David Levy. So Ulysses and Orbit MI don't work together, but I think there's a very similar philosophy there. I mean, perhaps you'll see some differences because it's all arrived at this idea independently, but I think Orbit MI is going to show how we can get different software components to integrate, and actually this is a completely different vision to the future of digital technology and shipping to the one we're normally hearing about today, but I think it's far more realistic. Well, I'll leave that to readers to decide. So pass over to David, thanks. David, you're on mute at the moment.
And my video has been disabled. Can someone start my video?
Oh dear. Farah, have you got a control to any idea on his video? I don't think
it says the host has stopped my video.
Let me try and get that sorted out for you. I apologize, David.
It's a great picture of me, I know, but you know, it might be a little bit more compelling.
Share your screen while she's doing that. There's a share screen button.
I'm not going to be sharing anything. I'm just going to talk through. Okay. Start my video. Okay. Can everyone see me now? Great. Thanks, Carl. And it was a pleasure to listen to you, Dimitri. As Carl mentioned, we haven't worked together or spoken together, and that's hopefully something we can do. Orbit MI is a software company, software as a service company, also an emerging data as a services company based in New York, and we've got offices around the world, and we partner with a number of different companies. I'd say a couple of things based on what you kicked off with, Carl, and also in response to some of the things Dimitri was saying, is I want to make sure we're not setting up false choices, which is that it's either all about data or you do things with data lakes, or it's consolidation, or this or that. The fact of the matter is, based on the customer and based on their existing infrastructure and where their goals are and what they're trying to achieve, you might need to have a combination of data feeds, software integrations. You still might need a data lake. There may need to be data scientists, and there may be other components that need to be integrated into a solution. And so it would be great if it was just easy to pick one way or another, but our point of view is that we're trying to take data and operationalize it based on what the clients are trying to achieve. And we do that in a way that helps them leverage their existing systems. As Dimitri points out, there's been decades of investment made in software systems. And our product kind of sits in the middle, or our vision sits in the middle of what or offers a different option from single source, very niche, specialized products, and systems integrators, which do everything customized. As we point out, that's not efficient. We use the word consolidator, and I'm not sure I agree with that term, but the idea that there's another way, we use the phrases aggregation and integration. We want to create a single source of the truth, so to speak, where clients can log in and absorb those data points and data feeds and subscriptions and other software feeds, as you pointed out, Carl, into one place where each individual user can see data transformed in a way that makes it very useful to that person in the context of their day-to-day job. We call that process of taking data, which I think we all agree is, assuming that the quality is good, is you really can't do much with data, ones and zeros. But once you transform it and turn it into insights that people can take action on, we do that in what we call intelligent connected workflows. So there may be a calculation, for instance, that involves data feeds, involves business logic, that does something like compute carbon emissions. Okay. Now, different people need that computation presented to them in different workflows. Someone who's in operations, who's on shore, who's monitoring a vessel, may need to see that on a daily basis to monitor fuel consumption. Someone who is in a post-fixture job, say demurrage or risk or claims, doesn't necessarily need to see on a day-to-day basis. They may need to see an entire voyage or an entire charter party. What was the results there? And someone who's in a pre-fixture role, say chartering, might want to estimate carbon emissions for a particular voyage based on what's been calculated in the past that will help them calculate and estimate CII, and also now EU ETS, help them understand what kind of allowances they may need to book. So for us, that happens in a couple of different ways. One, Orbit itself has software solutions with business logic and software development that we provide on our own. We have different solutions, which you go to our website, you can take a look at them. But we also do this process we described as integration and aggregation, which is we go to customers and we will see what their problems are. They tell us what they're trying to achieve, and we determine whether and how to aggregate their systems and their feeds into Orbit. And so a lot of that data mapping that Dimitri was talking about that does in fact seem difficult. And yes, there is a lack of standards, but the ability for software companies such as Orbit and others to leverage technologies such as APIs to map it on a customer by customer basis is actually becoming relatively trivial. We can do it, and we do it all the time. And so it provides a different vision for how we solve our customers' problems, which is in the end, we are what we can agree was a reference to, I think, Dimitri, you referenced, Microsoft or some other Silicon Valley company coming in. We agree. We do not want to position ourselves as some smart technology company that's coming in to teach the industry about what it doesn't know. Right. That I think is not a great way to win friends and influence people, so to speak. We come in with the idea of being empathetic to our customers and saying, what are you trying to achieve? What do your systems look like? How can Orbit help? And in some cases, our solutions are the answers. In some cases, it's existing solutions. And then the job is to integrate and aggregate such that different users of the software can get the information they need at the right place at the right time to do their jobs. And so this idea of intelligent connected workflows is something that we've been talking about for a couple of years now. And one of the things that's important, if you think about the end of that workflow, there's a person, right? There's a Dimitri, there's a Peter, there's a Carl, there's someone who's got a job to do. And we're supposed to, we believe that Orbit's job is to empower that person, not to replace that person. We're trying to help that person do his or her job more efficiently, so they don't have to log in and out of multiple siloed systems and cut and paste from one system into Excel and another system and keep multiple screens on. For us, a big win is if you can have a customer who's got 6 or 7 screens open and they go down to 4 or 5 and then eventually get down to 1 or 2. That helps them because it helps them do their jobs. And that also helps internally with our customers. What we've seen is it helps them collaborate internally, because although someone, say, in chartering and operations may need to use that carbon emissions calculation differently in their job, it's the same calculation, right? It's the same information, same output. So it's not like the chartering department is calculating their own carbon emissions over here, and the operations department is calculating them over there. And then you have a discussion argument about which is correct. So the idea of aggregating data and integrating it into a place where different users can use it for different reasons helps address some of those data issues, where at least the different users can agree, this is the single source of the truth. This is how it's been calculated. I'm going to use it for this workflow. You're going to use it for that workflow. And so there's a lot there. And I think I'm about bumping up to my 10 minutes, but I really appreciate the opportunity to present our vision of how we think the industry is going to move forward.
Oh, yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, so there's lots of software components. Yeah, I was at this event organised by OTG for London Shipping Week on Tuesday night, and it started off with this panel about where do we think the future of shipping software is going. And I really wanted to say something along this lines, but they weren't like a sort of software audience, they were a shipping audience, so I don't think they would have understood. But I think perhaps that's a discussion we'll have after this, is where we think on this basis that the future of digital technology is going. So now we'll go back to the UK for Peter Mantell, who's the Chief Commercial Officer with Thea, and we've done webinars with Peter, how they integrate with Spire, which is a webinar provider. They also integrate with Topua, which is a ship hydrodynamic modeling company. So we'll hear Peter's perspective on vessel performance and where integration fits.
Yeah, thank you, Carl, for the intro, and thank you, David and Dimitri, for some interesting and interesting views, and really make you think a little bit where the industry has come from and where it's actually going. And I may slightly have to adapt my presentation a bit as well, but I think we see a lot of change in the industry, and if you look at the traditional industry a couple of decades ago, you had certainly the maritime industry was kind of dominated by some key players, right? The likes of the Sperry Marines, the Raytheons, the Furnos, the JSCs of these worlds. And I think that also all these companies, they were kind of the key providers of marine technology to the shipping industry. And I think somewhat, to some extent, they've been somewhat slow in their own digital transformations, and new startup companies were mainly focused on developing software solution as such. And all of a sudden we have a whole different and created a whole different landscape. And that's something where, by the way, Carl, to pronounce our company correctly, it's Veer, right? It's an Icelandic wind, by the way. But I would like to share a few slides and show you how we kind of approach it, and also our marketing strategy. We are B2B. We have a B2B strategy, and also we do not sell finished, solutions, but we sell APIs, which is really interesting approach. So I will try to share just a couple of slides here. Share screen, there it is, and I just go and share my screen. I hope that you can. Yeah, you can see my screen.
You're not in presenter view yet.
I'm in presenter view, right? Wonderful.
No, you're not in presenter view. It doesn't matter.
I'm not.
Don't worry if you're not in presenter view. We can just see the slides down the left-hand side. That's all.
Yeah, okay. I can actually put it in presenter view as well. So you just see the one slide, if that works. Yeah. Better?
Yep, fine, yeah.
Great. Yeah. So, like I said, we've seen a lot of change in the industry as we used to know it, and we kind of try to kind of tap into that opportunity as well, and what's happening. And I know APIs are APIs; they're not the end solution. And as Dimitri rightly said, so you need to know where the data is coming from. But at the same time, I think that the time where you have big companies and providers who provide and build everything in house, these days are truly gone. And what we have seen and what we're actually doing as well, we are also building our almost an ecosystem itself by connecting APIs from different emerging companies, technology providers, and new startups. And all of a sudden you create quite a big ecosystem, and you can actually plug different technologies which are supplementing to certainly what we do in the optimization and performance routine. And so we're building and continue to build the platform. And it's a great way to actually deliver services to the customers, because we know what our domain expertise is. We don't have the resources to develop all the other things we would like to develop. So we're actually starting to connect APIs and with strategic partners. And it's been very successful so today. And I think it's something which you see a lot more often. Of course, everybody knows what API ISO stands for. It's quite incredible. And again, like I said, at Veer, we actually delivering all of our solutions through an API, which is quite unique, I think. Now, I just want to give you a few examples how we actually connecting the maritime world through APIs. And this is interesting, and this is by no means a full list of what we're doing here. But if I go to the next slide, and you can see here in the middle, it's TFOS core engine. That's the optimization engine, which again, we deliver that as an API engine to our strategic partners. They can build it into their own digital applications. But if you go below in the screen, this is really getting very interesting, where we start integrating and working with a lot of strategic partners through API, really. And you can see at the end, we have a rapid data access service. It's really, it's a mechanism which can load and retrieve data very, very quickly. But through that exchange, through that API, we have a strategic partnership with Spire. Again, we are not a weather company provider, which can compete with the likes of Spire, where they maintain a constellation of some 150 low orbit satellites, which supplement the weather forecasting data by measuring atmospheric properties. So again, we have a strategic partnership. If you look at optimization, performance optimization in general, we all understand that weather and accurate weather forecast is hugely important. And there's a big influence of the optimization outcome. So again, through an API, we get the Spire weather data in, and we use that. Same with mid-ocean data. Again, you need mid-ocean data. Again, it's all delivered through an API. Same with storm tracker data. We have external parties where we get that data from, and that's all kind of being fed into the optimization engine and used in its computation. and it just continues to grow, right? We know that traditionally we talked about performance optimization was predominantly weather routing, but we're getting more and more different objectives. Yeah, we want to optimize for. That's why we also developed a multi-objective optimization engine. But we need additional technologies and sources of data to drive that engine. You see on the right-hand side here, these are all external APIs. We have a strategic partnership agreement with and a license agreements to share APIs, but we're getting data from navigational databases, from IMO databases, where we get data such as traffic separation zones, piracy zones, environmentally friendly zones. Again, the engine needs to know that in order basically to produce navigable routes. Ship models, again, all delivered through APIs. It's not something where we develop ship hydrodynamic and aerodynamic models in-house. We work with partners. Again, it's an open architecture. So I think Carl mentioned for Euronav, one of our larger customers, they use the TOQA hydrodynamic models. They are data-driven models, so they get real-time data from the vessel, and that goes into the data-driven models. Again, it's a dynamic interface. Our engine pings the TOQA's ship models through an API, and it uses it during the optimization process. We use other external model providers like Blue Boss Marine, for example. So it's extremely flexible, open architecture, and depending also on the customer requirements, what ship models you want to use. Again, one note on performance optimization, ship models, equally important as the engine itself and the weather and the quality of the weather forecast data. Now we're starting also, for example, bringing in port congestion data, again, all through various different providers through an API. At the moment, the optimization, you can optimize for just-in-time arrival, but you manually have to enter a arrival time and date in. You can automate it now if there's data available from the ports, and some ports have pretty good, decent data. So you automate all that process and you get the data through the application programming interface. Likewise, fuel and bunkering, a lot of fuel and bunkering providers on the market. You need to take that into consideration when you're looking at performance optimization. Again, it's not something we at TEER are going to produce a whole data set, where's the best bunkering prices and fuel prices, etc., or the best quality. We work with external parties. And that's how we see that we're creating almost an ecosystem by connecting APIs from different quality providers and start creating a pretty extensive portfolio of services you can connect to the optimization. And it's all related to performance optimization. See, there's a CII calculator API. Again, we do not have all the data to accurately calculate CII because you need data on auxiliary engines, on boilers, etc., etc. We, of course, know the fuel consumption and carbon footprint of the main engine. But so again, we have external parties. We exchange the optimized routes. They calculate the CI rating, and the routes get the CI rating. Again, all done through API connected solutions. It's fantastic. And this is just an example of how we see how the industry and the portfolio of solutions you get through one major API by a connected world of APIs. And again, about data as well, I don't want to spend too much time on discussing data. Data quality, as we know, it's extremely important. Shipping, still, we talk about digital transformation. Still, I would say 60% of shipping is using Noon report. Is that good enough? That's always a question not for me to answer, but there are certainly early adapters of technologies where they have been receiving data now, high fidelity, high frequency data from the ships for years and years. And they simply have an enormous competitive advantage over the competition because they know how the vessels perform and how they can improve it, and etc. So I'm going to leave you with that thought and happy to go in the Q&A session, I assume. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you very much, Peter. If you want to stop sharing the slides and invite everyone to bring all their cameras on, and
I'll do that. Yep.
We'll go to the Q&A session. I'd really like to leave our readers to leave with a sort of idea of where we're going. I think we sort of overlap with at least 80% of what we're talking about. We all see that the integration of multiple component parts is a future to all of this. I think we're using different language. I know Dimitri doesn't like APIs and Peter does, but I mean, integration is if it works, you know about it, and if it doesn't work, you know about it. So I guess you all managed to make it work. So that's that's more important than the actual terminology. David, you said you wanted to respond to something that Peter was saying? I don't know. Was that the data
Yes,
quality point?
can you hear me?
Yep.
Sure.
Yeah, I think what Peter's slide, I got very excited, and I wish I would have created one for ourselves, which is essentially how Orbit and other types of systems will absorb those APIs.
Mhm.
So that's those are that's one of the ways that we work, but also the word that Peter used, which I think is really important, is this idea of an ecosystem. Right. And there's ecosystems in the industry, there's ecosystems within customers. And however we describe it, or whatever our particular solutions are, the idea that we need to recognize this idea of an ecosystem, that, vessel to vessel, company to company, system to system, there are a number of different players and different systems that have to feed into, as Peter pointed out, the calculation for CII. Right? There's auxiliary engines, there's onboard systems. So the idea that, and maybe this goes back to kind of what you were saying, Dimitri, is there's not going to be someone who comes in and just does everything for everyone, right? It's just too complicated. But there is an ecosystem here that we all need to acknowledge, and I think that's really powerful as we continue this discussion, for us to think about. Maybe we're doing things a little bit differently, but we're all acknowledging that it's bigger than one company, and it's bigger than one particular solution.
Yeah, Dimitri was talking about the shipbuilding analogy, where the shipyard is a kind of consolidator and it picks the best suppliers of all the different parts, and that's where we're probably going with digital technology. I know you follow this blue, David, as this view, David. You were saying in our warm up about using the best component for each thing, and I'm sure shipping companies would love to do that. Do you want to share your?
I think that's right. And Dimitri's analogy of the shipyard, if you think about an aggregator, integrator, right, is to try to bring what in the high tech world they call best of breed solutions, right, to customers. And for us as a software developer, actually building software, it takes the longest, it's the most expensive, and it's the riskiest. And while we have done that in the past, we approach each of those decisions strategically after we've analyzed what the customer needs, and then we'll try to find best of breed solution. So an integration that we have is with Sedna, right? The email platform. We're not going to build an email platform. That would be ridiculous. So we'll find a best in breed. We have a partnership with Sedna. There are things that Theer does that we would not try to replicate, so we'll work with them. And so that idea of of being like a shipyard, determining what the best components are, and for us, we have to do it on a customer by customer basis. Customers might have a certain VMS, so we have to adapt to that and that little ecosystem. But I think there is a good analogy there, and it's important. I think this. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Dimitri, and obviously open to questions. Is that shipping as an industry knows all about collaboration, right? It knows all about this stuff. It's been doing it for decades, if not hundreds of years. There's not one company that makes the entire vessel, right? It's all about collaboration and getting the right components and people and services together. And so it's a matter of getting, taking that analogy potentially and shifting it towards software solutions such that, the industry can say, oh, okay, I understand exactly the analogy that you're talking about there.
Well, should we go to Dimitri? What do you think about what you heard?
Yeah, I think the industry is very experienced in this. I think the disconnect with software, because everybody understands shipyards, everybody understands consolidators of even a single generator. That's a consolidation in many cases of different components necessary for that project. I think what the disconnect is with software is that people don't understand that whereas you can't merge two ships together very easily, you can merge two software systems theoretically. You can't, because they are built like ships are built with components that are not particularly, you can't break them down very easily, but it shouldn't be that way. You should be able to merge two software systems together. if you know what they're doing, if they give you the precise and detailed information of what they're doing at every stage. And I think this is something that's going to help the consolidation and the aggregation, the integration, which is absolutely necessary. No client is ever going to be interested in going through the steps of gluing together two systems. They're just not interested, and they are facing that now, and they think it's absurd. We had a conference about 6 months ago, I think, in Greece here, and large companies were saying it's absolutely absurd. They've got 10 different systems doing the same thing. One guy uses this, the other guy uses that, and there's no tolerance for things not fitting together. So this is a big issue, and it has to be solved from a say organization standpoint and an intent from the vendors, but also from the technology standpoint. You know, for me, you're saying that I don't like the term API. API is fine. I can't see in the API. I can't make a computer read the API and then tell me if what I've put together is going to end up with the right result, because the API doesn't tell me everything I need to know. It tells me what the person that wrote the API thought I might need, but it doesn't know my application. So if I'm taking information out of that, it doesn't give me enough all the time. Finally, I can't actually run the API. I can't say, okay, execute, and I can see what the API is passing through, what it isn't passing through. All this might sound a bit off the wall to some of you, but it has to go that way. It can't be something where we sit and have huddled together to figure out why it doesn't work. We've done that. We've been doing integrations for decades, and every so often somebody changes something. We have to sit there and work out what it's doing, and we can't even explain it to each other fully because there's so much that isn't visible and isn't transparent. So I think that our industry is going to make the move. It may be ahead of the other. Everybody says shipping is a laggard. I've never understood that concept. People are practical. They don't buy technology for the fun of it. But laggards, I don't remember that. I mean, when satellite communication came out, people were buying it in the next day. They were putting satellite dishes on their ships. So I think that the industry is going to pick up this morass of systems, and they're going to demand decent answers.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that all three companies, one of the strong points is digital integration, even if you're describing it and approaching it in slightly different ways. I don't know if Peter and David, I mean, you don't call your companies digital integration companies, but also that's maybe a marketing choice, but you talked about it a lot, and it's obviously a big part of your offering. I don't know, would you agree with that, Peter or David?
Yeah, the end user wants more and more, right? And we're evolving very quickly. And yeah, they always say shipping is slow in uptaking technology. I agree with Dimitri. They're not, but sometimes it appears to be. But they always want more and better and the latest. And certainly in the world we live now, every day there's a new startup which is something unique and nobody else has, right? And rather than trying to compete with all of that, you just if it's unique, obviously you got to do your due diligence and everything. Right, and if it makes sense, and if the customer wants that you work out some kind of partnership agreement, and connect the two technologies, if that's through API or traditional, tabular integration. It doesn't really matter, right? At the end of the day, but it gets much easier to connect different solutions in what appears to be a seamless end solution, right? This is the interesting bit where things go quite rapidly, and again, I think there's very few companies who can take it all on, right? I mean, and so you focus on your core and you build your ecosystem with strategic partners. And again, the ecosystems on its own can connect, right? Really easy as well. So ecosystem connect with other ecosystems. So I think it's really exciting time at the moment for shipping, right? It's going very quickly. There's a bit of pressure as well, which always helps, right? As well to push some technologies through, but exciting times ahead. And a lot of good technologies hitting the market at the moment as well.
Well, we're open to questions if anybody wants to put any in the Q&A box. Sorry, Dimitri, you were going to say something?
No.
Okay. So one question that comes to mind. So we had a lady in one of our conferences in Oslo said that she runs offshore vessels. She says that she's got 55 ships, and each one has about 10 different cloud software systems they need to log on to. I think they're like equipment suppliers systems, like the ballast water system and the engine system, and then each ship has a different suite of a different range, of portfolio of systems to log on to. It's all turning into a bit of a nightmare, and then there's all people in the company. Somebody's saying we should have this, and somebody's saying we should have that, and that's all we're having this debate about what digital maturity means. I don't know if anybody would like to share some advice. I think there's a lot of shipping companies in the same situation. Maybe if we go to David, I think, because this is exactly what maybe less on vessel operations, you're more on the sort of office side, I think, isn't it? But
yeah, I do. I think there's sheer complexity of what happens on one of these vessels is you should never be underestimated, right? And each of these systems, someone has said, this is not novel to me saying this, but we've probably heard people say that these vessels are just data generating machines, right? There's data coming from every system all over the place, and the premise is that we need to capture that data and use it in some way. And so the hardware manufacturers see that as well, and so they're trying to put different pieces of interface or API or whatever technology on it, so the customers can access that particular siloed data point. That's the problem, though, as your person you're talking about mentioned, is that even on the vessel, right, there could be 10, 20 different systems, each of which is kind of raising its hand and saying, listen, pay attention to my data point, it's very important. And so there's a lot of things that have to happen in terms of integrating that data, and some of it could happen on the vessel before it goes to the cloud. Some of it could happen, in the word you used before, could happen in a data lake, and then it gets processed. It could actually happen in the cloud. But at some point, even with, as Peter was pointing out, these different companies that are appearing like mushrooms, right? If they're just providing yet another single solution for a silo, that's just like another, a piece of equipment on board generating data. It doesn't help address the problems that the customers are saying. And as Dimitri said, customers don't want, they're running vessels, right? They're running a shipping company. They don't have the need, the skills, the patience, and the desire to stitch these systems together. So, and that can be difficult. So I think there is something here that is important. And one of the things that Dimitri said, which I really appreciate, is this idea of transparency, right? Like trust and transparency has to underlie everything that we're doing, because you have to trust the data, you have to trust what the software is doing, and some of that is a company basis where we know we are very transparent with our customers about how things work. Because if you're a ship owner, you need to have the trust that what is coming out of the software, whether it's fed through a consolidator or through APIs from Tier or coming out of orbit, is accurate, or as close to accurate as you could possibly get, considering the information that you have available. So, it does no one any good to hide that. And so, I know that's for us, it's an important pillar of what we do. And I know in terms of driving this kind of ecosystem, if we're not trusting each other, if we're not sharing what some aspects of what we're doing, the end customer, who is the most important one, they're just going to hold up the hand and say, you know what, I don't believe it. I don't believe it.
We had a question come in. So Swati Bhatia, I've just been to your LinkedIn page, Chief Officer at Shell in the United Kingdom. Question is, any thoughts on what are good KPIs for a good vessel performance data solution? So is there a way we can say we're 8 out of 10 for our vessel performance data solution? I know oil company people often like KPIs and a lot of people don't like them. I don't know who would like to have a go at that.
Well, I can respond to that. We were involved with a group called Get Set Maritime a couple of years back, and if I understand the question, it's not about KPIs for what makes for vessel performance, right? That's something that each company is going to have to
says,
develop.
KPIs
it's for the solutions.
Yeah.
I would be happy to follow up with you, Swati. There's a group called, like I said, Get Set Maritime. It's developing, almost like an RFP, which has different questions that you should ask of your potential providers, so you can do check boxes, right? It's basically it's Excel spreadsheet, and it's a series of checklists. So, do they have APIs? Are they published? What are the different integrations that it has, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So those kinds of things are emerging in terms of providing some kind of standard for customers to be able to make choices among these different solutions. Because if someone doesn't know what Theo does compared to what Ulysses does compared to what Orbit does, they'll probably just either not make a decision, or they'll just go for the cheapest one, right? And get nothing out of it. So having these kinds of tools to help people understand the differences and what they need is very important. And like I said, I'd be happy to follow up directly on that.
So Peter or Dimitri, you want to, how does Swati know if his system on board his next ship is any good?
Well, I mean, that's always possible when the solution's been around for a while, certainly not if it hasn't. So if you wait 20 years, you'll get a good rundown on what makes a good, but a good, and then I can't continue the sentence because good at what? Because performance is a multifaceted issue. What part of performance? So yes, you will get this after 20 years. You won't get it immediately. You might be able to say that if you bought a planned maintenance system, that you could have a good sort of guidance as an RFP, as you say, of what to look for. But it took 20 years for that to settle as well, because people they haven't gone through the cycles of to find out what works and what doesn't. So if you took one of those guidances 5 years ago for a planned maintenance system, it wouldn't differentiate. It wouldn't be useful. And we've had, let's say, DNV and BV and NK and various others assessing planned maintenance systems. Nobody pays attention to those from a point of view of how good the software is, because it's about convenience. In the end of the day, as David said, the person's got to make a decision sooner rather than later. So 15 seconds makes a lot of difference. So if he has to introspect for 15 seconds or look for something somewhere else, how are you going to describe that in a KPI when you don't even know what the process that you're discussing is? So it's difficult to come up with KPIs. We love them, yeah, but it takes about 20 years for the dust to settle and people to know exactly what it is that they're doing. We underestimate what we're doing in processes. We do much more than anybody notices or we can write down in an essay.
Peter, do you want to share your thoughts?
Yeah, really difficult to answer that accurately. I'm with Dimitris on this one as well. But again, good performance KPIs. It all goes back to the architecture of the system itself. You need good synchronized data. Too many data suppliers, they piggyback off black boxes, VDRs, which simply just isn't good enough. So they get averages rather than direct data. So good ships models themselves to analyze behavior. If you want to look at degradation of the hull, too many solutions use very poor one-dimensional freedom models where they only know what the resistance is in cold weather, for example. So there's a lot of underlying factors which actually do define what is a good performance management tool. So it's actually the data, the quality of the different sub-components, so to speak. It's got to be up there. I don't think industry sometimes really know how many poor solutions are out there, which you think you're managing the performance of your ship, but you may be up by some margin, right? But yeah, so difficult just to answer that in one sentence here. But quality data, again, I already see the company industry starting taking shortcuts. That, oh, we got a high fidelity, high frequency data while they're tapping into the VDR. It is just not good enough. People just don't understand that, right? Or you get to an engine automation system where everything is already averaged, right? gotta go direct to sensor as an example, right? And again, like also the amount of ship models or data-driven models, hydrodynamic, aerodynamic models, they are so important if you really want to measure performance of your vessels as such. And it's quite often just kind of swept under the carpet, right? We just use what the supplier gives us. It's good enough. But
if I could, there's one thing I'd like to just mention here that Dimitri's point about waiting a number of years to get the experience to understand is well taken. The approach that we take at Orbit with our customers is we allow them to pilot our software for free. In fact, customers never have to pay anything until we show that we are driving the kinds of results and the KPIs that they have on their business. So they get to use our software get on their vessels, which is delivered via the internet. There's no installations, and so we address that issue that you're pointing out, Dimitri and Peter, about KPIs by saying to customers, start using the software. And a pilot can take 30 days, it can take 60 days or so, whatever it is. But we agree that these are the KPIs you're trying to reach in your business. Start using Orbit, and then afterwards we work together with them to make sure that they're on their pathway. So that's how we try to address that issue of time, which is just use the software. Don't pay us anything until you agree that we're driving the results that you want.
Oh, very good. We've got about 4 minutes left. I mean, the question perhaps to finish off with, I mean, if somebody's working in a shipping company and in charge of managing the portfolio of applications and wants something that will last a long time, will integrate well, is there any further pieces of advice we'd like to leave them with? Should we go perhaps a minute each with Dimitris, David, and then Peter? Do you think
any pieces of advice? I think that there's first of all, there's a lot of confusion in the world of software. I mean, we haven't, and a lot of companies, including Microsoft, distracting us with new AI and so on, and suggesting to people that suddenly the world's changed because of something developed over the past year. I think that one has to understand the industry very well. The software industry. Once you understand the software industry, it's not rocket science what it's doing. There are 5 or 6 huge companies that are wanting to control as much of the industry as they can. So everything they do affects that. So that makes it difficult inside domains to provide, let's say, performance monitoring for ships, because none of the signals coming out of Silicon Valley are helping anybody in that respect, or very few of them. Some of us will say we use ML, which is popular, and then we can score in a tick box for that. But the truth of the matter is that it's very difficult for the average buyer of software, either big or small, in any vertical, to understand how to conduct their selection, because a lot of the signals coming from Silicon Valley, which owns all the media that's affecting all the IT managers, those signals have absolutely nothing to do with what we're doing in our industry, or the next industry. So that's I would say is if you think about it, there's an easy way out. We never were free of big entities, empires, and so on, telling us what to think and what to do. So it's a question of filtering out the stuff that they would obviously want, and realizing that there's other stuff to think about too.
Some very clever people making dedicated effort to this, specializing in shipping, and they might not be the ones making the most hype, I think. David, do you have a last word, so advice to somebody managing IT portfolio?
I think what Dimitri's talking about is relevant, right? Some solutions that people are reading about in the media, et cetera, that are just not relevant to our industry. And I think one of the things that we talk about being future-proof, right? That's a cliche that you've probably heard. And to us, that has 2 meanings. One, it has to do with the way the technology is built, and that it's built such that it can flex and grow such that as your needs change, you don't need to throw it out. But really, the more relevant story is being future-proof against regulations, which is the way the software is built and the way the aggregation engine and integration engine is built, is that no matter what comes down from the EU or the United States or the IMO or any other entity that's going to impose some sort of regulation, for us, that's just a matter of shifting business logic calculation, perhaps partnering with another company that's got a different data feed. So our future proofness really is in two ways. It's about the platform, but it's also about being relevant. I want to stress that word towards the end here. Is we always try to be as relevant as we possibly can be to the industry and to our customers.
Well, Peter, got some last words, last minute.
We ran out of time, right? So, but yeah, it's a bit difficult. I mean, I like digital transformation, and I'm some technologist in many ways as well. I always think and like to advise, don't be too afraid to test out new technologies and really open, you got to embrace that, right? Because there's so much interesting technology hitting the market at the moment. Embrace the developers, but do your due diligence, really know that if you get in bed with them, they are solid. The underlying technology, again, future-proof. We hear that from David as well. Extremely important when you look at technology, that it's not just a one-off of pretty-looking bit of code, right? And it's easy on the eye, but do your due diligence. And again, in generally speaking as well, it goes back to the data. Start getting data from your ships, high-quality data. It is not that expensive anymore these days, right? And it's truly important. It goes a long way, driving a lot of other technology and applications, so to speak. So I know we're running out of time, so I'll hand it over to you, Carl. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Peter, David, and Dimitri, and thanks to everyone for watching. I hope that's an interesting perspective on where we're going with digital technology. We're going to try the same idea again in October and November. In October, we're looking at shipboard aspects of vessel performance, and in November, we're looking at chartering and commercial aspects. And that's the end of the webinar. I shall pass back to Farah for the closing words. Cheers.
Thank you very much.
Oh,
thank you for having me.
So Farah there? Oh, sorry.
Thank you to our guest speakers, Dimitri Liras of Ulysses Systems, Peter Mantell of There, and David Levy of OrbitMe, and to all our viewers. We'll be sending you a YouTube video link soon and their contact details if you have any further questions. Join us for our next webinar with Digital Ship on the 28th of September with Shipping, which you can book online at our website. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.